Pain heals. Chicks dig scars. Glory lasts forever.
When The Replacements hit theaters in the summer of 2000, most audiences walked in expecting a light, goofy underdog sports comedy and walked out having genuinely cheered for a football team that doesn't even exist. Keanu Reeves, fresh off the cultural tidal wave of The Matrix, playing a washed-up former quarterback trying to claw his way back into the game, seemed like an odd pivot at the time. And Gene Hackman, a two-time Academy Award winner, lending his gravitas to what was essentially a locker room comedy, raised more than a few eyebrows in Hollywood circles. But what almost nobody talked about back then is just how much real football, real history, and real behind-the-scenes drama went into making this movie feel as authentic as it does. From actual NFL veterans coaching the cast on the finer points of the sport to a genuine labor dispute that inspired the entire plot, there's a lot more going on underneath the helmets than most casual viewers ever realized. The film has quietly become a comfort watch classic over the last 2 decades, the kind of movie people stumble across on a Sunday afternoon and end up watching to the end no matter how many times they've already seen it. Part of that staying power comes from just how much craft and sincerity went into a film that, on paper, sounds like a throwaway sports comedy. So let's break down 15 facts about The Replacements that even die-hard fans might be hearing for the very first time. Reeves didn't just memorize a handful of lines about audibles and hand the rest of the responsibility off to a stunt double standing just out of frame. Before cameras ever rolled, he spent weeks working closely with football coaches and a former professional quarterback to learn the actual mechanics of the position, snap counts, footwork on his dropbacks, and how to read a defense before deciding where to throw the ball. He drilled 3-step, 5-step, and 7-step dropbacks over and over until the movements looked instinctive rather than rehearsed. And he even practiced holding the ball properly for field goal attempts in case a scene ever called for it. None of this training was gentle. Reeves reportedly picked up real bumps and bruises out on the practice field, which is especially notable given that he had undergone neck surgery only a few years prior to filming. On top of the physical training, he reportedly studied game tape of real NFL quarterbacks to nail the posture, rhythm, and quiet confidence of someone who has actually played the position at a high level, rather than simply looking like an actor who had been handed a football and a helmet for the afternoon. That level of preparation is part of why Shane Falco reads as a real athlete on screen instead of a movie star playing dress-up. Back in 1987, NFL players walked off the field in a dispute over pay structures and free agency rules, refusing to play until the league addressed their concerns. Rather than shut the season down entirely and risk losing lucrative television deals, team owners scrambled to field replacement squads made up of retired players, semi-pro athletes, and total unknowns who had never sniffed an NFL roster before. Games were still played, broadcast contracts were still honored, and for a strange handful of weeks the league was essentially staffed by a patchwork of underdogs nobody had heard of. One team in particular thrived during that stretch, winning every game it played with replacement players and going on to capture the championship that same season, which only added to the legend of that bizarre chapter in league history. The Replacements takes that very real slice of NFL history and reshapes it into the fictional story of the Washington Sentinels, giving overlooked, cast-off players in the movie the same kind of unlikely shot that real strike replacements were handed back in 1987. Even some of the interpersonal drama in the film, like the tension between 2 competing quarterbacks fighting for the same job, echoes real rivalries that played out during that strike season. Believe it or not, the studio's first choice to play Coach Jimmy McGinty wasn't a slam dunk. Hackman had already played a memorable and widely praised basketball coach earlier in his career and reportedly hesitated to take on yet another sports coach role, worried it might feel like a retread rather than something fresh. What ultimately won him over was the way the character was actually written. McGinty isn't portrayed as a screaming, red-faced disciplinarian barking insults from the sideline. He's calm, reflective, and genuinely invested in giving washed-up or overlooked players a second chance at something they thought had already passed them by. That emotional undercurrent gave Hackman a completely different angle to play than the coaching roles audiences had already seen him tackle. And it's part of why his performance ended up feeling so distinct rather than like a rehash of familiar territory. Rather than filling out the roster with stunt performers who vaguely understood how to run a route, the filmmakers went out of their way to bring in athletes who had actually played the game at a serious level. Former Chicago Bears quarterback Jim McMahon, a Super Bowl champion, worked with the production as a consultant, teaching the cast how real quarterbacks communicate, carry themselves, and read the field during a live snap. Beyond McMahon's involvement, many of the players seen suiting up for the Sentinels and their opposing teams had genuine football backgrounds of their own, whether from college ball, semi-pro leagues, or brief NFL stints. That decision paid off in a big way behind the camera too, because it let the director shoot longer, wider takes of the actual gameplay instead of relying on choppy, quick cuts to disguise inexperienced performers who couldn't convincingly run a real play from start to finish. Because the production leaned so heavily on real players and experienced stunt athletes who understood how to deliver and absorb contact safely, the collisions captured on camera have a weight and a snap to them that's genuinely difficult to fake through choreography alone. The team did take safety seriously behind the scenes. Extra padding was hidden underneath uniforms, and camera angles were carefully planned to sell the intensity of a hit without anyone getting seriously hurt. Still, football is football, even when it's being staged for a movie camera, and the cast and stunt performers walked away from filming with the usual assortment of bruises, sore shoulders, and minor aches that come with physical, full-contact work. Reeves himself reportedly took some real, unscripted contact during both training and principal photography to make sure his on-camera reactions looked authentic rather than staged for the benefit of the lens. The now iconic sequence, where the rowdy replacement players collide with the cheerleaders in a dive bar, was actually added later during the writing process, and it ended up becoming one of the film's most quoted and rewatched comedic beats. Screenwriter Vince McEwen worked through multiple drafts of the script, adding character-driven scenes specifically designed to show how this ragtag group of misfits bonded with one another off the field, not just how they performed during games. The bar scene, alongside a handful of other now classic moments involving the team, helped establish the Sentinels as a lovable band of outsiders rather than simply a roster of athletes filling out a plot. It's a good reminder that some of the movie's most memorable moments only exist because of rewrites made well after the initial script was locked. While the movie surrounding him leans heavily into broad comedy, Reeves reportedly approached Falco's backstory, a once promising quarterback whose career imploded after a very public failure on the field, with genuine emotional weight rather than playing it purely for laughs. He wanted audiences to actually feel Falco's humiliation, his years of quiet regret, and his cautious, almost reluctant hope for redemption, instead of treating the character as simply a straight man for the wilder personalities around him. That choice ended up giving the entire film a much-needed emotional anchor. Without at least one character playing things sincerely, the surrounding comedy might have felt weightless or disposable rather than earned, and Falco's arc gives the audience something real to root for underneath all the jokes. Much like Reeves' approach to Falco, Hackman reportedly refused to play Coach McGinty purely for laughs, even in scenes surrounded by broad physical comedy. He carried himself like an actual NFL-caliber coach throughout filming, disciplined, sharply focused, and quietly protective of the players under his charge, even while the chaos of a ragtag, misfit team unfolded around him on set. That contrast appears to have been entirely intentional, and it works remarkably well on screen. McGinty's steady, grounded seriousness makes the chaos of his players' antics land even harder as comedy, in much the same way a strict teacher trying to wrangle the rowdiest classroom in the school somehow becomes funnier the more seriously that teacher takes the job. To capture the scale, noise, and atmosphere of professional football, the production shot its game sequences inside the real home stadium of the Baltimore Ravens, using genuine locker rooms, authentic sidelines, and the venue's actual scoreboard and stadium lighting rigs rather than a soundstage built to imitate them. That commitment to realism extended into the camera work as well. The crew used sweeping, wide stadium shots and dramatic aerial angles designed to mimic the look of an actual televised NFL broadcast, right down to the placement of sideline cameras. Reeves reportedly said that stepping onto that field, surrounded by bright stadium lights and the roar of a crowd, made the experience of leading a team feel unexpectedly real, and that sense of scale comes through clearly in the finished film. Beyond just teaching the physical mechanics of playing quarterback, consultants like Jim McMahon coached the cast on the real language of football. The strings of numbers, colors, and code words that quarterbacks use to call plays at the line of scrimmage while keeping opposing defenses guessing. Reeves in particular worked hard to make his play calling sound natural and unrehearsed, rather than like a script being recited, which matters more than casual viewers might assume. Few things break the illusion of a sports movie faster than dialogue that clearly wasn't written or delivered by someone who understands how the sport actually works. And the production's insistence on accuracy here goes a long way towards selling the realism of every huddle and audible in the film. Watch the football scenes closely, and you'll notice the editing rhythm shifts dramatically compared to the rest of the movie. Quick cuts jump between collisions at the line of scrimmage. Tight close-ups capture the exact moment of impact, and the camera suddenly pulls back to sweeping stadium-wide shots to keep the energy relentless and unpredictable. Combined with the fact that many of these plays were actually performed by real athletes and experienced stunt performers rather than faked in post-production, the editing gives these sequences an intensity that feels closer to a sports drama or even an action film than a comedy. That editing choice helps sell the genuine stakes of the Sentinels' improbable playoff push, so the audience actually cares about the outcome of the games rather than just waiting for the next joke. After early test screenings, some viewers reportedly felt that the romantic subplot between Shane Falco and the character played by Brooke Langton needed considerably more attention, saying the connection between them felt far too subtle to register emotionally. The original cut of the film leaned heavily into the on-field action and the comedic dynamics of the team, leaving the romantic storyline feeling almost like an afterthought tucked into the margins. That audience feedback caught the filmmakers' attention. They didn't reshape the movie into a full-blown romance, but they did go back and add small, quieter emotional beats, meaningful glances, brief pauses, understated moments of connection, designed to make the relationship between the two leads feel more grounded and earned without overwhelming the film's identity as a sports comedy first and foremost. With a comparatively modest budget for what was, on paper, a mid-tier sports comedy, bringing on a two-time Oscar winner like Hackman wasn't a foregone conclusion for the production. According to reports that have circulated for years since the film's release, Reeves voluntarily agreed to reduce his own salary substantially in order to free up enough of the budget to make Hackman's casting possible, with some accounts claiming the reduction was as significant as 90% of his usual fee, though the exact figures have never been officially confirmed. This wasn't the first time Reeves reportedly made this kind of sacrifice either. He had previously done something similar on The Devil's Advocate in order to help bring Al Pacino onto that project. It's a rare move in an industry where actors typically fight to maximize their own paychecks, but it fits a pattern of Reeves apparently prioritizing the quality of the finished film and the chance to work alongside actors he genuinely admired over his own compensation. With computer-generated crowd technology still fairly limited and prohibitively expensive at the time the film was made, the production instead filled the stands with thousands of actual local fans, paid to show up and react exactly as they would during a genuine NFL game. To make the crowd appear even larger and more consistently full than it actually was, the filmmakers relied on a handful of clever practical tricks. Groups of fans were seated in specific, clearly visible sections of the stadium and then repositioned to different areas between takes, and editors later reused footage shot from multiple angles during post-production to give the impression of a completely packed venue. Those techniques worked well enough that the finished scenes feel like they were pulled straight from an actual NFL broadcast rather than staged for a film crew. Even the paid extras reportedly got swept up in the moment, cheering and booing organically as though the games unfolding in front of them were entirely real. Given that the plot draws so directly from a real, and even decades later still somewhat sensitive 1987 players' strike, the NFL declined to lend the production any of its official branding, team names, logos, or league identity. Rather than scrap the project or water down the story to smooth things over with the league, the filmmakers built an entirely fictional football world from scratch. The Washington Sentinels, the film's central team, don't exist anywhere in real football history, and every uniform, logo, and team name featured throughout the movie was designed specifically to sidestep any legal entanglement with the actual NFL. The league itself is never even referred to by name within the story. It's a genuine testament to the production design team that so many casual viewers still assume they're watching something officially licensed and endorsed by the NFL, when in reality every last detail was constructed independently precisely to avoid a very real legal and political headache tied to a strike the league clearly had no interest in revisiting on the big screen. More than 2 decades after its release, The Replacements continues to hold up not just because it's funny, but because of just how much genuine effort went into making it feel authentic underneath all the jokes. Real training, a real NFL stadium, real players filling out the roster, and a real, largely forgotten slice of league history all combined to give the film a foundation that most throwaway sports comedies never bother to build. It's easy to write the movie off as lightweight nostalgia, the kind of film people half remember from a childhood cable rerun, but revisiting it with all of this context reveals a production that took its subject matter far more seriously than its trailer or marketing ever let on. Reeves and Hackman both chose to play their characters with real conviction rather than winking at the camera. The football action was captured with a level of authenticity most sports films still don't bother chasing. And the entire story was built around a genuinely fascinating piece of NFL history that most fans have long since forgotten. Whether you grew up watching this movie on repeat or you're discovering it for the first time, knowing everything that went on behind the scenes makes every huddle, every hit, and every locker room joke land just a little bit harder. It's proof that even the silliest-looking sports comedy can hide surprisingly serious craftsmanship once you actually look past the surface. At the end of the day, that's probably the real reason The Replacements has aged so well while so many other sports comedies